All right, now the moment you guys have all been waiting for, and that is what is the best trail bike of 2025? What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB, and welcome to the Awesome MTB Trail Bike Buyer's Guide. Oh my god. Oh my god. What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB, and welcome to the conclusion video of the Awesome MTB Trail Bike Buyer's Guide. Over the last 2 months, we've been testing out 11 of the best trail bikes on the market. Now these are all going to be 29ers with 140 to 150 millimeters of travel, and even though there's 11 bikes in this test, each one of these bikes has a very unique personality. And the goal of this series was to help make the purchase of your next bike a lot easier by giving you guys the information. Honestly, you guys, when we started Awesome MTB, that was our biggest goal. We know how hard it is to find the perfect bike, and we really wanted to provide an awesome resource to you guys, so hopefully you guys have been enjoying the series. Now, before we get into this video, I do want to give a huge thank you to the supporters of this series. We are an independent mountain bike media company. It's literally just my wife, Hannah, and I. Honestly, without these companies, it wouldn't be possible, so huge thank you to Crank Brothers, Feedback Sports, Tailwind Nutrition, Pit Viper, and most importantly, Rig Supply for letting us use their space. I also want to give a huge thank you to the sponsor of this conclusion video, and that is Pro Bike Supply. You guys know we absolutely love Pro Bike Supply. They are one of the most awesome family-owned and operated online bike shops out there. They have so many amazing brands to choose from, and they specialize in turning your dream bike builds into reality. With expert staff on standby to answer all of your questions, nothing is impossible for them. Like I said, they carry so many amazing brands, including Ibis, Yeti, Specialized, Pivot, Mondraker, Transition, and so many more. The coolest thing about them too is they have the most extensive demo fleet in the entire US, and if you demo any bike from them, you can actually put that demo fee towards the purchase of your next bike or anything in the store. All of their bikes are expertly assembled and backed by their amazing customer service satisfaction, and on top of that, they recently redid their entire website as well. Think of them as your online local bike shop because the customer service is amazing and so are their prices. They take care of friends of the channel too, and besides the insane sales they are running this holiday season, be sure to use code AwesomeMTB or let them know that we sent you and they will make that deal even sweeter. They are authorized to ship all over the country and have a huge warehouse filled with bikes and parts ready to help make your dream bike build a reality. Once again, you guys, I can't recommend Pro Bike Supply enough. I'll actually put my Mo Dream Built in the description of this video, so if you're ever in the market for your next bike, definitely hit them up. All right, now that we have all that out of the way, let's get into what you guys are actually here for, and that is what is the best trail bike of 2025. I have spent so many hours over the last 2 months testing out each one of these bikes. Like I said, there's 11 in this test, and each one of these bikes is awesome. And I actually think that each one of these bikes has a very unique personality and is going to be for different riders. first one's going to be the Giant Trance. Now this one was definitely one of the more efficient bikes in the test. I feel like the Giant Trance definitely felt like that enduro bike for XC racers. It's very efficient at pedaling and it has a very racy feel off the front end. It's nice long and low up front, so it really does reward riders who want to push their bikes in a little bit more of a race atmosphere, but it still has a very short rear end, so it's going to be very playful in and out of corners. I feel like Maestro is a very efficient suspension design. I do think it feels a little bit harsher than some other bikes in this test in terms of overall travel. At the end of the day, it does feel like a 140mm travel bike, but that's not a bad thing. It's still very capable in this sense. I do feel like this bike has a very confidence-inspiring geometry, especially with the bike in the low position in the rear. And overall, I was very impressed by how much terrain this could handle, but at the same time too, I kept going back to this is an XC Racer's enduro bike. Very efficient, very capable, and very racy overall. In terms of where I think the Giant Trance X rides best, I feel like places like SoCal that have a little bit more looser conditions that might not be necessarily as techy overall. However, if you live somewhere with a lot more jagged rocks and very steep downhills, I do think you might appreciate a little bit more of an active suspension design. I also don't see this as a surprise because Giant's US headquarters is actually in Southern California. The next bike we're going to talk about is the Rocky Mountain Instinct, coming all the way from BC. This bike definitely feels like a BC bike. It has a very active suspension design, and you can definitely tell traction is its priority when it comes time for the downhills. Now, another thing that I appreciate about the Rocky Mountain Instinct is even though it had a very active suspension design, you were still able to play around with the bike. And it does have a nice pop, especially in and out of corners, or if you want to kind of gap into a section when you are on steeper terrain. Yeah, throughout my entire test on the Rocky Mountain Instinct, I just kept going back to, man, I really loved riding BC earlier this year, and this really does feel like a BC bike. And in terms of geolocation, obviously if you live in British Columbia, I feel like the Instinct is going to do awesome, as well as anywhere in the PNW. I also think the Rocky Mountain Instinct would do great in the desert, especially if you're out in Sedona or Moab or anywhere in Arizona. I feel like the Rocky Mountain really does shine on more technical terrain. If you live somewhere a little bit more looser over a hard pack like SoCal, I definitely think you might want to look at some other bikes in this test if you're looking for overall efficiency. Like I said, the Instinct definitely has a little bit more of an active suspension approach. However, it still holds its own in SoCal, and yeah, I had a great time on the Rocky Mountain Instinct. Oh my God. Now the next bike is going to be the Evil Offering, one of the funner bikes in the test. If you've never ridden an Evil, you're honestly missing out. The biggest thing that comes to mind with the Evil Offering is cornering. This is probably one of the best cornering bikes on the test, as well as the most playful. I constantly found myself jumping around on the trail. It had a very overall stiff frame, and I'm honestly blown away by that Delta suspension design. I think that might be the best suspension design in the test. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah, the Evil Offering is a very playful 29er that's very capable as well. Now, I do think the Evil Offering rides great in the X-Low mode. I would like to see the Evil Offering maybe get a second position that would complement the X-Low, so X-Low becomes standard low, and then maybe an extra low, or they would figure out how to do it. Where do I think the Offering rides best? Obviously in the PNW, it has a very active suspension line, but it's also insanely playful, so it's the best of both worlds. And yeah, anywhere where you have a lot of roots and you really do need traction, but at the same time too, you like playing around on your trails if it's nice, tight, and twisty. Now, say you live somewhere that needs a little bit more high-speed stability, like right next to a bike park, or maybe you live somewhere where your trails are just in general faster. I do think there's some other bikes in this test that have a little bit more high-speed stability, but yeah, that's the terrain that I think shines for the Evil Offering. next bike we're going to talk about is the Cannondale Habit. Now, even though the Habit was one of the more simpler bikes in this test with no real Geo adjustment and no flip chip, nothing that you can adjust on the actual frame, I do think simple sometimes is better. And I was continuously impressed by how the Habit rode out on the trails. I think it's a very capable bike. It has a very confident, inspiring geometry and a very active suspension approach. And I was continuously impressed by just how confident the Habit felt out on the trails. Now, where do I think the Habit performs best? I definitely think terrain that's a little bit more on the chunky side. Like I said, it is a little bit more of an active suspension design. The bike feels very plush. And I think anywhere that you have technical terrain that you can play around on, the traction is going to be very impressive, especially when you want to jib around out on the trails, or anytime that you need a little bit more rollover. Like I said, it's a very confident, inspiring geometry. I like the 64.5-degree front head angle. And overall, I love that wheelbase with the size proportional chainstays. All right, the next bike we're going to talk about is the Pivot Switchblade. Coming from South Mountain, Arizona, you can definitely tell that this bike likes to ride technical terrain. It performs insanely well on steep, techy bits. I feel like that higher stack height combined with the DW link and a shorter rear end, you have so much control over your line choice, and this probably is one of the most nimble, precise bike out of this test. Now, where does the Pivot Switchblade perform best? I do think places in the desert like South Mountain, I mean, that's obviously a given, but I also think anywhere precision is important to you. There's a lot of trail systems I like to ride where you have up and over kind of weird features, and I think anywhere where you really need to generate speed and keep that momentum going, the Switchblade is an amazing bike for that. And like I said, precise line choice is pretty insane on this bike, and at the same time too, it's very capable on the descents. And then we have the brand new Specialized Stumpjumper 15. Now this was an amazing bike out on the trails because it was the perfect blend of both worlds. I was continuously blown away by how capable this was on the descents, but at the same time too, it still retained a very trail bike element to it. You could still play around with it out on the trails, but the rollover of this bike is absolutely insane, and I do love that Genie rear shock. I feel like that Genie rear shock definitely lives up to the marketing hype. It's very coil-like, but at the same time performs like an air shock out on the trails when you need it to. Overall, I was very impressed with the Stumpjumper and how broad of a riding range you're able to achieve with just that one bike. Now, where do I think the Stumpjumper performs best? I do think that there's going to be a broad range of places that you can take this bike. I think it'll perform great anywhere that there's tech as well as flow trails. The bike, like I said, has a very playful feel out on the trails, but it's very capable at high speeds as well. Now, the Stumpjumper isn't the most efficient bike out of the test, so if pedaling efficiency is important to you, I do think there are going to be some better options for that. However, overall, very impressed by how capable as well as playful the Stumpjumper 15 is. We also have the Ari Delano Peak. Now, I really do think this is a true trail bike. It's very playful out on the trails, probably one of the most playful in the test, but at the same time too, it handles its own. Like I said, I rode this bike all over British Columbia, and it has a very confident, inspiring geometry, but at the same time too, at its heart, it's a very playful trail bike. It's also my wife's Hannah's favorite bike that she's ever ridden. She really gets along with the playfulness of it. So what's your thoughts on the Ari Delano Peak?
It's super nimble, poppy, and playful, but also really stable when it needs to be. So yeah, I think it's like the best all-around bike for me. I really enjoy it.
And like I said, at its heart, it's a true trail bike. I feel like some bikes on this 140 to 150 millimeter category try to tackle too much on the descents. This is a bike that still handles its own on the descents, but like I said, at the end of the day, it is a trail bike, and it inspires you to have fun and play around while out on the trails. So where do I think the Ari Delano Peak performs best? I would say terrain where you can really play around with the trails. The Delano Peak just feels like one of those bikes that's gonna do really good in a ton of places, as opposed to amazing in a certain amount of places and not that good in other places. I feel like what Ari Ari did with the Delano Peak is try to make that one bike that was going to do a bunch of things good and kind of be a perfect one bike quiver. Oh my God. We also have the brand new Transition Sentinel, so this is definitely one of the newer bikes in this test, and I love the Transition Sentinel's approach to geometry. I feel like they did a very good job of making a very capable 29er that could be used all over the country. They went a little bit higher on the bottom bracket height and a little bit steeper on the head angle over the previous iteration of the Sentinel, and they also still have a little bit of a longer chainstay on here, so you get that perfect blend of high-speed stability as well as control over your line choice for steep technical terrain. Love the giddy-up suspension design on here. I feel like it's very playful out on the trails while still feeling very capable. It has a very deep feeling to its suspension and a somewhat bottomless feel, especially towards the end of the stroke. I do really like how versatile this bike feels. It feels like you can ride it anywhere from a bike park to Moab to the PNW to Florida. Anywhere you take it, it's going to perform well. I do think that there are some other bikes in this test that might be a little bit more efficient. So if pedaling efficiency is important to you, or maybe you ride trails that are a little bit smoother overall, you might want to look at some other bikes in this test. And then we have the Yeti SB 140. Now with Switch Infinity, this has to be one of the fastest bikes I've ever ridden. It's truly insane how much speed you're able to generate on the SB 140. And overall, it's a very capable bike out on the trail. So much more than its numbers would lead you to believe. It only has 140 millimeters of travel and a very conservative head angle, but it also probably is one of the most capable bikes in the test on the descents. And like I said, the suspension design is absolutely insane on the SB 140. So where do I think the Yeti SB 140 performs best? This is a bike where the faster you go, the more comfortable it gets. So I definitely think that trails that reward a little bit higher speed riding are going to be right up this bike's alley. This is also probably one of the most efficient bikes in the test. So I feel like this bike takes blue and green trails and is able to make them fun while still being very capable to handle double blocks. Like I said, it's a very efficient trail bike that also rewards high speed riding. So if you live somewhere like down here in Southern California, we have a lot of techie trails that definitely have a little bit more sections where you can let off the brakes. I think this bike loves those environments, and obviously places like Colorado, their backyard. But if you live somewhere a little bit more slow speed tech riding, like say British Columbia, I definitely think there might be some other bikes in this test you might want to look at. But yeah, I was very impressed by how the SB 140 rode. The next bike is the Propain Hugene. This bike is very interesting because it has a conservative front end in terms of head angle, but it also has a little bit of a longer rear end that rewards high speed stability. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You have nimbleness from the front and you have stability from the rear with a little bit more of an active suspension design. I do also think it had a little bit of a shorter reach up front while still having that longer rear end. So if you're a rider that you want a lot of control of the front end of your bike, but you still want that high speed stability, I think the Geo on the thing is perfect for that. And also I do like that active suspension design, even though it's still playful out on the trails. And yeah, you can definitely tell that Propain, a gravity-oriented brand, tried to tone it back a little bit for the Hugene and make a true trail bike. I mean, Ibis bikes, I definitely think do that better. Now, last but not least, we have the Ibis Ripmo. Like I said, I have been on each iteration of the Ibis Ripmo, and this current iteration is probably the most capable 29er bike that Ibis has released. I really did enjoy how stable this bike was, but at the same time too, it's still an Ibis at the end of the day, so it was still playful while out on the trails. Now, where does the Ibis Ripmo perform well? I do think this current iteration of the Ibis Ripmo is actually going to do well in a wide variety of places. The previous two definitely didn't do as well in technical terrain, but I do think the changes to the Ibis Ripmo V3 make this thing very capable on the descents. It's a very burly style feeling frame, but it still has that playful Ibis feel out on the trail. So I would say a wide variety of trails. Now, in terms of internal frame storage, I'm gonna have to give the award here to Specialized. Now, Specialized has been doing internal frame storage longest, so I don't think this is gonna be a surprise there. I will have to give a very close second place to Transition. I feel like they solved the problem I didn't really think about too much out on the trails, and that's what to do with the bottle when you are getting into the frame. Now, in terms of Geo Adjustments, I think the winner here is gonna clearly be the Rocky Mountain Instinct. They just have so many adjustable options. They not only have a reach adjust up front, but they have 4 different Geo positions, and then they also have a chainstay adjustment. Now, the Specialized Stumpjumper and the Giant Trance X come close with both the reach adjustment as well as the Geo Adjust. In terms of actual looks, this is probably gonna be a little bit materialistic, but I do think that the bike that looks the best in this test is probably either gonna be the Yeti SB 140 or the Ibis Ripmo. I feel like both those bikes are very clean lines and vary from person to person, but in my eyes, both the Yeti as well as the Ibis probably look the cleanest line choice-wise. Now, in terms of suspension design, I actually think the bike with the best suspension design is probably gonna go to the Evil Offering. I love that Delta system. It feels magical out on the trails. The way it's able to absorb bumps, but at the same time still generate speed is pretty insane. I think a very close second is gonna be the Yeti SB 140. Like I said, that Switch Infinity also does a really good job of generating speed as well as rewarding higher speed riding. The faster you go on the Yeti SB 140, the more comfortable the bike gets. But overall, I feel like the Delta system found on the Evil Offering is insane. And if I ever meet Dave Weigel, I'm probably just gonna fanboy the entire time. In terms of what was the most capable trail bike in the test, this award is probably gonna have to go to Transition. The Transition Sentinel is one of those bikes that I would feel totally comfortable taking up to Whistler for the summer, riding the bike park every day, and then also getting a trail ride in the valley every day on it as well. I feel like the frame is very confident inspiring. It has a very stiff, stable feel to it. And overall, I feel like the bike itself just rewards more technical riding. And yeah, I was very impressed by how that Transition Sentinel felt. Now, in terms of which of these bikes felt more bottomless, I would actually say the Yeti SB 140 and the Transition Sentinel both felt like they had more travel than they had on paper. Obviously, the Sentinel does at 150 as opposed to the SB 140's 140. For that Transition Sentinel suspension design with that frame design and how stiff that frame feels, it feels very bottomless. And then the Yeti SB 140 also is one of those bikes that's interesting because even though it only has 140 millimeters of travel on paper, it also had a very bottomless feeling from its suspension design. Now, in terms of what bike is easy to ride, because this can be an important thing, especially for riders out there that might be just getting into the sport, or for riders out there who maybe get a little bit more confused with suspension setting and what geo position am I in. I would say the bike that are gonna be easy to ride are gonna be the Cannondale Habit and the Ari Delano Peak. These are two bikes that no matter who hops on them, you're gonna find a very easy learning curve while getting them up to speed. Now, they're both gonna be plenty capable. Like I said, the rollover on the Habit is insane, and the Delano Peak is a very playful bike while still retaining a very capable nature out on the trails. However, both of the learning curves on those bikes is very easy, and they're very simple overall in terms of not having too many geo adjustments to make, so you can never really second guess whether you're in the right geo position. Now, what is the best value bike out of this test? I have to say the award for this 100% is going to go to the Ari Delano Peak. I really don't think there's any beating the bang for buck that bike provides, especially with the diverse range of customers that are going to enjoy this bike. Like I said, it's very playful while still remaining very capable out on the trails. It's also my wife's Hannah's favorite bike. She really does like that it's still very capable, at the same time it's very light on its feet. If you look at this build on paper for the Ari Delano Peak, the pricing is insane, coming in under $5,000. You're getting top of the line RockShox suspension with a GX transmission drivetrain, SRAM Maven silver brakes, a DT Swiss 1700 wheel set, as well as a 30-day love it or return it guarantee. All right, now the moment you guys have all been waiting for, and that is, what is the best trail bike of 2025? For me personally, I had 3 personal favorite bikes out of this test: the Yeti SB 140, the Specialized Stumpjumper, and the Pivot Switchblade. Now, it's not to say that I didn't love the other bikes in this test. It's just, if I was to build up a personal bike, I have a riding style where I love big days out on the saddle. I like Type 2 fun, and I love pedaling, but at the same time too, I love gnarly downhill trails, so I need a bike to do both. Big days on the saddle motivate me to put those big miles in, but at the same time too, tackle a wide variety of trails, anywhere from green to double black, and also some of the hairier trails where I'm riding. And for me personally, I think these 3 bikes line up with my riding style. I feel like they're all very efficient, and they really do motivate me to get out there and really hammer on the pedals, but they're all very capable on the descents as well. Now, the Yeti SB 140, I definitely feel like is for days that I want to go fast. Definitely rewards higher speed riding. The Pivot Switchblade is that more playful option out of the 3. I feel like that's perfect for more technical terrain, and like I said, the precision as well as nimbleness of that bike is awesome, and it's a very playful feeling bike as well. The Specialized Stumpjumper, I feel like, is going to be a blend of both these bikes. It's very playful out on the trails, and it's very capable as well. It has a little bit more of an aggressive geometry, and you can actually make it more aggressive via its adjustments, and overall it's very capable on the descents while retaining a trail bike nature to it. So out of these 3, what do I think the best trail bike of 2025 is? I think the award's going to go to the Specialized Stumpjumper 15. Now, the reason I say that is because I feel like if you're going to give an award for best trail bike of 2025, you have to be sure that whoever sees that award and buys that bike is going to be stoked. And that's going to be anyone from a new rider who's just getting into the sport to someone who's a little bit more experienced, say an intermediate or an advanced rider that's looking for their next mountain bike or a mountain bike to add to their quiver. And you also don't know where that rider is going to be. Do they live in Sedona? Do they live in BC? Do they live in Whistler? Do they live in Florida? I feel like an award like that has to please a wider audience out there, and I do feel like the Stumpjumper is going to be that bike. The Stumpjumper 15 is a bike that I am confident that whether it's that new rider or that advanced rider, and wherever they live, if they buy that bike, they're going to be stoked. It feels like an awesome trail bike. It's very capable on the descent. It's very easy to ride. Like I said, I love the Yeti SB 140 as well as the Pivot Switchblade. I think those are going to be very high performance bikes. They're still going to be awesome bikes that whoever buys it is going to have an amazing time on. However, the Yeti SB 140, like I said, it rewards higher speed ridings. And I feel like if you were just like a new rider first getting into the sport and you just hop directly onto the Yeti SB 140, you might not appreciate it as much. Now, the same thing goes for the Pivot Switchblade. I absolutely love the Switchblade, and for me personally, I think it's a little bit more in line with my style of riding in terms of pedaling all day. It has a little bit more of an XC nature at its heart at the end, but at the same time too, it's very capable to where you can tackle more technical terrain. If you're looking for high speed stability, or maybe you're just getting into the sport, you buy the Switchblade, you take it to a bike park, you might have a little bit tougher time getting used to a little bit more conservative front head angle and an overall shorter wheelbase on that bike than say the Yeti SB 140 or the Stumpjumper. The Stumpjumper 15, like I said, anyone from a beginner to an advanced rider who hops on that bike, it's very easy to learn how to ride, and it's also good in a wide variety of trail selections. And I love that Genie rear shock. I really do think that Specialized nailed the Geo on the new Stumpjumper, and yeah, overall I was very impressed by how that bike performed. Now, I will say both the Yeti as well as the Pivot are going to be better climbers than the Stumpjumper. I just feel like they have a much more efficient pedaling platform. With that being said, that is the conclusion of our awesome MTB trail bike buyer's guide. Hopefully you guys found this series informative. Let us know in the comment section if we didn't answer any of your questions. Also, let us know if you guys would like to see another buyer's guide in the future. Huge thank you to Pro Bike Supply for sponsoring this conclusion video. So what was your favorite bike out of the test? Let us know in the comment section. Until next time, you guys, ride awesome and subscribe to the channel.